In this video, you'll learn how one unexpected encounter with Keanu Reeves on a quiet beach shows that kindness and courage can turn even the darkest pain into hope.
The morning fog hadn't lifted yet when Maria Gonzalez pulled her old Honda into the beach parking lot. Her hands were still trembling on the steering wheel, and she didn't move to get out right away. She just sat there, staring at the gray ocean through her windshield, watching the waves crash against the sand like they didn't care about anything happening in the world. Like they didn't know that 3 days ago, her 17-year-old son Daniel had tried to take his own life. He was stable now, that's what the doctors kept saying. Stable. But Maria didn't feel stable. She felt like she was falling apart from the inside, held together only by coffee and the desperate need to understand what she had missed. What signs had been there that she hadn't seen? What words had he needed to hear that she hadn't said? Her sister was sitting with Daniel at the hospital. Maria had been there for 62 hours straight when the nurse, a kind woman with tired eyes, had gently suggested she take a break. "You can't pour from an empty cup," the nurse had said. "Go somewhere, breathe. He's going to need you strong when he wakes up fully." So Maria had driven. She didn't know where she was going until she ended up here, at this beach where she used to bring Daniel when he was small. Back when his biggest worry was whether the waves would knock down his sandcastle. Back when she could fix everything with a popsicle and a hug. She finally stepped out of the car, wrapping her thin sweater around herself against the cool marine air. The beach was almost empty at this hour, just a few distant figures walking dogs or jogging along the waterline. Maria walked toward the water, her sneakers sinking into the soft sand, and she found a spot near some rocks where she could sit and just exist. She didn't want to think. She didn't want to feel. She just wanted the sound of the ocean to drown out the constant loop of guilt playing in her head. That's when she noticed the man sitting about 30 feet away from her. He was alone, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, sitting on a piece of driftwood and staring out at the waves just like she was. There was something familiar about him, but Maria was too exhausted to place it. She didn't care anyway. She wasn't here to recognize celebrities or make small talk. She was here because she was terrified that if she stayed in that hospital room one more minute without a break, she would shatter into pieces too small to ever put back together. She pulled her knees up to her chest and let the tears come. Quietly at first, then harder, her shoulders shaking with sobs she had been holding back for 3 days. She tried to muffle the sound with her hands, embarrassed even though she thought no one was paying attention. The ocean wind carried her grief out toward the water, and she felt more alone than she had ever felt in her entire life. She didn't hear him approach. "Hey," the voice was soft, careful, like someone trying not to startle a wounded animal. "Are you okay?" Maria looked up, her vision blurred with tears, and found herself staring into a face she had seen 100 times on movie screens. But there was no movie star energy here, no performance. Just a man with kind, sad eyes who had knelt down in the sand a respectful distance away, his hands open and unthreatening. "I'm sorry," she managed to say, wiping at her face. "I didn't mean to disturb you. I'll move somewhere else." "You're not disturbing anyone," Keanu said quietly. He didn't move closer, didn't invade her space. He just stayed there, present but not pushy. "You don't have to move, and you don't have to talk if you don't want to. I just wanted to make sure you weren't, that you were safe." Something about the way he said safe made Maria's heart clench, because she understood what he was really asking. He was asking if she was here to hurt herself. And the fact that a stranger, a famous stranger who probably had a million better things to do, had noticed her pain and come to check on her. It broke something open inside her. "My son," she heard herself say, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "My son tried to. He's in the hospital. He's 17. I don't know what I did wrong. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if he's going to be okay, and I'm so scared that I can't breathe." Keanu was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, he sat down in the sand across from her, not too close, but close enough that she could see his face clearly. And what she saw there wasn't pity. It wasn't the uncomfortable look people got when they didn't know what to say. It was recognition. It was understanding. "I lost someone I loved very much," he said, his voice barely above the sound of the waves. "A long time ago, and for years I asked myself the same questions you're asking now. What did I miss? What could I have done differently? How do I keep breathing when the person I love is in pain? Maria stared at him, her tears still falling, but something in her chest loosening just slightly. Did you ever find the answers? She whispered. Keanu looked out at the ocean, and for a long moment he didn't speak. The fog was starting to lift, revealing patches of blue sky, and somewhere in the distance, a seagull called out. No, he finally said, but I found something else, something I think might be more important. He turned back to look at her, and in his eyes, Maria saw decades of grief, of loss, of somehow continuing to wake up every morning anyway. I found out that sometimes the questions don't have answers, and that's not your fault, it's just life, messy and painful and completely unfair. But I also found out that love doesn't fix everything, but it matters anyway. And showing up matters, even when you're terrified, even when you don't have the right words. The fact that you're here, falling apart because you love your son so much. That means something, that is something. Maria broke down completely then, sobbing so hard she couldn't speak. And Keanu Reeves, one of the most famous actors in the world, simply sat with her in the sand while she cried, not trying to fix her, not offering empty platitudes, just being present. When she finally caught her breath, she looked up at him with swollen eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Keanu smiled, but it was a sad smile, one that held ghosts she couldn't see. "Because someone did this for me once," he said. "When I was at my lowest, a stranger who didn't have to care but did anyway, and I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to pass that on." He trailed off, looking back at the water. "Besides," he added quietly, "I come to this beach when I'm trying to remember how to feel human. Looks like maybe you needed the same thing today." Maria didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to process the fact that this moment was happening, that the universe had somehow placed her next to the one person who might understand what she was going through. But before she could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands, and when she saw the message, her heart stopped. It was from her sister. "Maria, come back now. Daniel is awake, he's asking for you, and he's saying something about a letter he wrote before. Maria, you need to see this letter." Maria's hands wouldn't stop shaking as she fumbled with her car keys. The phone was still clutched in her other hand, her sister's message burning into her brain like a brand. Daniel was awake. He was asking for her, and there was a letter. "Hey," Keanu's voice cut through her panic. He had stood up when she did, and now he was watching her with concern. "Are you okay to drive?" Maria looked at him, really looked at him, and realized she had completely forgotten who he was. In those 20 minutes on the beach, he hadn't been a celebrity. He had just been a person who understood pain. And now she was about to run away without even saying thank you. "My son is awake," she said, her voice cracking. "I have to go, I have to." "Then go," Keanu said gently. "But take a breath first, just one. You won't help him if you crash on the way there." Maria forced herself to stop, to inhale, to feel her feet in the sand and the salt air in her lungs. It only took 5 seconds, but those 5 seconds felt like the first real breath she had taken in days. "Thank you," she said, "for sitting with me I don't even know how to say it, just thank you." Keanu nodded, and there was something in his expression that looked almost like hope. "Go be with your son. He's lucky to have a mother who loves him this much." Maria turned and ran toward her car, sand kicking up behind her sneakers. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Every cell in her body was screaming at her to get to that hospital, to see Daniel's eyes open, to hold his hand and tell him she was sorry for whatever she had missed. The drive was a blur of traffic lights and desperate prayers. She barely remembered parking, barely remembered running through the hospital corridors, barely remembered the elevator ride to the 3rd floor. All she knew was that suddenly she was standing in the doorway of Daniel's room, and there he was. Her son, alive, awake. He looked so small in that hospital bed, so young. The monitors beeped steadily beside him, and his wrists were bandaged, and his eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted, but he was looking at her. Really looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time in months. "Mom," he whispered. Maria crossed the room in 3 steps and gathered him into her arms, careful not to disturb the IV, crying into his hair like she had when he was a baby. "I'm here," she kept saying. "I'm here, I'm here, I'm here." Daniel didn't pull away. He let her hold him, and after a moment she felt his thin arms wrap around her back, and he was crying too, both of them shaking together in that sterile white room while the machines beeped their steady rhythm. Maria's sister Rosa was standing by the window, tears streaming down her own face. She caught Maria's eye and nodded toward the small table beside the bed, where a folded piece of paper sat like a grenade waiting to explode. "The letter." Maria didn't want to let go of Daniel, but she felt him pull back slightly, and when she looked at his face, she saw something she hadn't expected. Not shame, not emptiness, but fear. The kind of fear that comes when you've revealed something you've been hiding for a very long time. "I wrote it before," Daniel said quietly. "Before I wanted someone to understand. But now that I'm here, now that I'm still here, I don't know if I want you to read it." Maria's heart clenched. "You don't have to show me anything you're not ready to share, Mijo. I just want to understand. I want to help. But only when you're ready." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, staring at the letter like it was a living thing that might bite him. Then, slowly, he reached over and picked it up. His hands were shaking almost as badly as hers had been on the beach. "I need you to read it," he finally said, "because I don't think I can say the words out loud, but you have to promise me something first." "Anything." "Promise me you won't hate me. Promise me you won't think I'm weak or stupid or broken." Maria took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "Daniel, listen to me. There is nothing in this world, nothing in that letter, nothing you could ever do or say that would make me stop loving you. Do you understand? Nothing." Daniel's eyes filled with fresh tears, but he nodded and handed her the letter. Maria sat down in the chair beside his bed, her legs suddenly too weak to hold her. Rosa quietly stepped out of the room, closing the door behind her to give them privacy. And Maria unfolded the paper with trembling fingers, and she began to read. "Mom, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for leaving. I'm sorry for being too weak to stay. I'm sorry for all the times I said I was fine when I wasn't, and for all the times you asked me what was wrong and I told you nothing. The truth is, I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't have the words. And by the time I found them, it felt like it was too late. I've been getting messages for almost a year now. It started as a joke, I think. Some kids at school who thought it would be funny to tell me I was worthless, that I was ugly, that the world would be better off without me. At first, I ignored them. I told myself they were just being stupid, that it didn't matter, that I was stronger than that. But here's the thing about words, Mom. They add up. One insult doesn't break you, but 100, 1,000, every single day waking up to messages telling you that you should die, that nobody would miss you, that you're a waste of space. It gets into your head. It becomes a voice that never stops talking, even when you're trying to sleep, even when you're in class pretending to pay attention, even when you're sitting at dinner trying to act normal so you wouldn't worry. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed, because I thought it was my fault somehow, because I thought if I just tried harder to be normal, to be likable, to be the son you deserved, it would stop. But it never stopped. And I got so tired, Mom, so tired of fighting, so tired of pretending, so tired of waking up every morning knowing that the first thing I would see was another message telling me I shouldn't exist. There's one more thing I need to tell you, and this is the hardest part. The person sending most of the messages isn't a stranger. It's not just random bullies at school. It's someone I thought was my friend. Someone who smiled at me in the hallways while destroying me in private. Someone you know, someone you trust. I'm not going to write his name here because I'm scared of what might happen if I do. I'm scared you'll confront him and he'll deny it, and everyone will believe him because he's good at pretending. He's so good at pretending, Mom. Better than me. I just wanted you to know that it wasn't your fault. You didn't miss any signs because I hid them from you. I lied every single day because I thought I was protecting you, and instead I just made everything worse. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I love you. I always loved you. I hope that wherever I am now, I finally found some peace. Your son, Daniel. Maria couldn't see the paper anymore. Her tears had blurred everything into an unreadable mess. Her chest was heaving, silent sobs racking her body as the weight of what her son had been carrying alone crashed over her like a tidal wave. A year, an entire year of torture, and she hadn't known. He had sat across from her at the dinner table, done his homework in the kitchen, kissed her good night before going to his room, and all the while he had been drowning in messages telling him to die. And she hadn't seen it. She hadn't protected him. "Mom," Daniel's voice was small, terrified. "Are you mad at me?" Maria looked up at him, and something inside her broke and rebuilt itself in the same moment. She wasn't mad at him. She was furious at the world that had done this to her child. She was heartbroken that he had suffered alone. And she was determined, more determined than she had ever been in her life, to find out who had destroyed her son's will to live. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. "Daniel, you have to tell me who did this to you." Daniel's face went pale. He looked away, staring at the wall like it held all the answers he couldn't give. "I can't," he whispered. "You don't understand. His dad is—" His dad knows people, important people, and everyone loves him. Everyone thinks he's perfect. If I say his name, nobody will believe me. They'll say I'm lying because I'm the weird kid, the quiet kid, the one who tried to. "Daniel," Maria grabbed his hand, squeezing tight. "I believe you. I will always believe you, and I don't care who his father is or who he knows. I don't care if he's the most popular kid in California. He almost took you from me. Do you understand? He almost took you from me, and I will burn down the entire world before I let him get away with that." Daniel stared at her, and for the first time since she had walked into the room, something that looked almost like hope flickered in his eyes. "You really believe me?" he asked. "With everything I have." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then, very slowly, he looked back at her, and his jaw tightened with a courage she hadn't known he possessed. "His name is Marcus," he said. "Marcus Webb. His father is Councilman Richard Webb." Maria's blood ran cold. She knew that name. Everyone in the city knew that name. Richard Webb was one of the most powerful men in local politics, a man whose face was on campaign signs and whose name was whispered with respect and fear. A man who had connections in every corner of the community, including the school board, the police department, and half the businesses in town. And his son had been systematically destroying her child for a year. Maria looked at Daniel, at his bandaged wrists and hollow eyes, and she made a promise to herself in that moment. It didn't matter who Richard Webb was or how much power he had. It didn't matter if nobody believed them. It didn't matter if the whole world turned against her. She was going to fight for her son, even if she had to fight alone. But as she sat there, holding Daniel's hand and preparing herself for a war she didn't know how to win, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it at first, too focused on her son to care about anything else. But it buzzed again, and again. Finally, Rosa poked her head in the door, her expression strange. "Maria," she said slowly, "there's someone here to see you. He says he met you at the beach this morning and he wants to help." Maria's heart stuttered. It couldn't be. She walked to the doorway and looked down the hospital corridor. And there, standing by the nurse's station with a coffee cup in his hand and concern written all over his face, was Keanu Reeves. He met her eyes across the distance, and he gave her a small, sad smile. "I hope I'm not overstepping," he said quietly when she approached him. "But I couldn't stop thinking about you, about what you're going through, and I know what it's like to feel like you're fighting something too big to fight alone." Maria stared at him, speechless. "I want to help," Keanu said, "if you'll let me." And for the first time in days, Maria felt something other than despair. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. Maria led Keanu to a small waiting room at the end of the corridor, away from Daniel's room and the curious eyes of nurses who had started to recognize the famous face in their midst. She closed the door behind them and turned to face him, still not quite believing this was real. "How did you even find me?" she asked. Keanu set his coffee down on a small table and leaned against the wall, his posture casual but his eyes serious. "You mentioned your son was 17. You mentioned he was in the hospital, and when you ran to your car, I saw the parking permit on your windshield. Cedar's Sinai." He shrugged slightly. I asked at the front desk if there was a Maria here visiting her son in the psychiatric unit. They couldn't tell me anything official, but a nurse recognized your description and said she'd pass along a message. Maria shook her head slowly. But why? You don't know me, you don't owe me anything. We talked for 20 minutes on a beach. Keanu was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was heavy with something old and unhealed. 30 years ago, I lost my best friend to an overdose. 10 years after that, I lost someone else. Someone I was going to spend my life with, and both times I felt exactly what I saw in your eyes this morning. That helplessness. That desperate need to do something, anything, to stop the pain. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't have anyone to help me figure it out. He looked at her directly, and Maria saw in his eyes a grief that had never fully faded, only transformed into something quieter and deeper. I've spent a lot of years learning how to live with loss, he continued. But your son is still here. He's still fighting. And if there's anything I can do to help you fight for him, I want to do it. Not because I'm famous or because I think I have all the answers, but because kindness is the only thing that ever made any of my pain bearable. And I'd rather spend my time being kind than doing almost anything else. Maria felt tears threatening again, but this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of gratitude, of disbelief, of the strange and overwhelming sensation of being seen by a stranger who had no reason to care. There's a boy, she said slowly. A boy who's been bullying Daniel online for almost a year, sending him messages every day telling him he's worthless, telling him to die, and his father is Councilman Richard Webb. Keanu's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. Richard Webb, he repeated. I've met him. Fundraisers, charity events. He's very good at shaking hands and making promises. He's also very good at making problems disappear, Maria said bitterly. I don't have money. I don't have connections. I work 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads, and I can barely afford the hospital bills that are going to come from this. If I try to go up against the Webbs, they'll crush me. They'll say Daniel is lying, that he's mentally unstable, that I'm a bad mother looking for someone to blame. Keanu nodded slowly, absorbing this. Do you have evidence? The messages, the timestamps, anything that proves what this kid did? Maria's heart sank. Daniel's phone, but I don't know if he saved everything. And even if he did, what good does it do? The police won't take on a councilman's son over some text messages. The school will protect Marcus because his father donates money to every program they have. I've seen this story before. The powerful protect the powerful, and people like us get left behind. Keanu pushed himself off the wall and walked toward the window, looking out at the city sprawling below them. He was quiet for so long that Maria started to wonder if she had scared him off, if the reality of what she was facing had made him reconsider his offer to help. But when he turned back to her, there was a fire in his eyes she hadn't seen before. You're right that the system protects powerful people, he said. I've seen it happen my whole career. I've seen studios cover up abuse. I've seen executives destroy careers to protect their friends. I've seen money buy silence over and over again. But I've also seen what happens when one person refuses to stay quiet, when one story gets told loudly enough that it can't be ignored. He walked toward her, stopping a few feet away. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a politician, I can't promise you that we'll win, but I know people, good people. Lawyers who actually care about justice, journalists who aren't afraid to go after powerful targets, advocates who specialize in cyberbullying cases. And I have something else that Richard Webb doesn't have. What's that? Keanu smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had learned to turn his pain into purpose. A platform, millions of people who listen when I speak, and a complete unwillingness to let a bully get away with destroying a child's life just because his daddy is important. Maria stared at him, her mind racing. Part of her was terrified. Going public meant exposure, scrutiny, the possibility of everything backfiring spectacularly. But another part of her, the part that had made a promise in Daniel's hospital room, felt something else entirely. Hope. I need to talk to Daniel, she said. This has to be his choice. He's been through too much for me to make decisions about his life without asking him. Keanu nodded immediately. Absolutely. This is his story to tell or not tell, but whatever he decides, I'll support it, and so will you. They walked back toward Daniel's room together, and Maria felt something shift in her chest. For 3 days, she had been carrying this weight alone, drowning under the fear and guilt and helplessness. But now, for the first time, she had someone standing beside her. Someone who understood loss, who understood the power of kindness, and who wasn't afraid to fight. When they reached the door, Maria paused and looked at Keanu. "Why do you care so much?" she asked quietly. "Really, you could be anywhere right now. You could be on a movie set or on vacation or living your life. Why are you here in a hospital corridor offering to fight a politician for a family you just met?" Keanu was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph, its edges soft from years of handling. He held it out to her, and Maria saw a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Her name was Jennifer," he said softly. "She was carrying our daughter when she died. The baby didn't survive either, and for a long time afterward, I didn't want to survive either. I understand what your son felt. That darkness that makes you think the world would be better without you. I've been in that place." Maria looked at the photograph, then back at Keanu's face, and she saw the tears he was holding back. "What got you through?" she whispered. "People," he said simply. "People who showed up when I couldn't ask for help. People who sat with me in the dark until I was ready to look for the light. I'm still here because of kindness. And if I can pass that on, if I can help even one person find a reason to stay, then maybe all that pain meant something. Maybe I can turn it into something good." He put the photograph back in his pocket, and when he looked at her again, his expression was calm and determined. "Let's go talk to your son." Daniel was sitting up in bed when they walked in, and his eyes went wide when he saw who was with his mother. For a moment, he looked like any other teenage boy meeting a celebrity, starstruck and speechless. But then the reality of the situation crashed back over him, and his expression shuddered. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked warily. Maria sat on the edge of his bed and took his hand. "Daniel, this is Keanu. I met him this morning at the beach, and he wants to help us. But only if you want his help, only if you're ready to fight." Daniel looked at Keanu, then back at his mother. "Fight how?" Keanu pulled a chair over and sat down, putting himself at eye level with Daniel. He didn't treat him like a child or a victim. He treated him like an equal. "I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what you've been through," Keanu said. "But I know what it's like to feel like the darkness is winning, and I know what it's like to feel powerless against people who seem untouchable. What I also know is that bullies count on silence. They count on their victims being too scared or too ashamed to speak up. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to be silent." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You don't understand. Marcus's dad is. He's everywhere. He knows everyone. If I say something, he'll make sure everyone thinks I'm crazy. He'll ruin my mom's life. He'll try," Keanu agreed. "But here's the thing about people like that. They only have power because everyone lets them have it, because everyone is too scared to challenge them. But when one person stands up, sometimes other people find the courage to stand up too." Daniel shook his head, but Maria could see the conflict in his eyes. Part of him wanted to fight. Part of him was still that little boy on the beach who built sandcastles and believed the world was good. "What if nobody believes me?" Daniel whispered. Keanu leaned forward slightly. "Then I'll believe you, your mom will believe you, and we'll keep telling your story until someone else believes it too, and then someone else, and someone else after that, because the truth has a way of getting out, Daniel, no matter how hard people try to bury it." Daniel was quiet for a long time. The monitors beeped. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Finally, he looked at his mother. "What do you think I should do?" Maria squeezed his hand. "I think you're the bravest person I know, and I think whatever you decide, I will stand beside you. But I also think that the boy who hurt you doesn't deserve to get away with it. And I think there might be other kids out there, kids he's hurting right now, who need someone to be brave first." Something shifted in Daniel's expression. The fear was still there, but underneath it, something else was growing, something that looked almost like determination. "There are others," he said quietly. I'm not the only one Marcus targets. There's a girl in my class, Sophie, and a kid who transferred last year, and maybe more. I don't know all of them, but I've seen the way Marcus operates. He picks the quiet ones, the ones who won't fight back. Keanu and Maria exchanged a look. If we can find them, Keanu said slowly, if we can show a pattern of behavior, it's not just your word against his anymore. It's multiple victims with the same story. That's much harder to dismiss. Daniel nodded, and Maria saw something change in her son's eyes. The emptiness that had scared her so badly was still there, but it was being replaced by something else. Purpose. A reason to keep going. Okay, Daniel said. I'll do it, I'll tell my story, but I need you to promise me something. Anything, Maria said. Promise me that whatever happens, you won't blame yourself. This wasn't your fault, Mom. You didn't miss the signs because I hid them from you. I lied to you every day because I thought I was protecting you. So please stop carrying that guilt. I need you to be strong enough to fight. And I need you to know that I love you, and none of this was because of something you did or didn't do. Maria broke down then, pulling her son into her arms and crying into his hair. And this time, the tears weren't just grief. They were relief and love and the fierce protective rage of a mother who would do anything to save her child. Keanu stood quietly and walked toward the window, giving them space. He looked out at the city lights beginning to flicker on below, and he thought about all the people out there carrying pain they couldn't talk about, fighting battles nobody knew about, drowning in silence because they were too afraid to ask for help. He thought about Jennifer, about his daughter who never got to take a breath, about all the years he had spent learning to live with grief. And he thought about how strange it was that a chance encounter on a beach could lead him here, to this hospital room, to this family that needed exactly what he had learned to give. Kindness, presence, the simple act of showing up. When Maria finally let go of Daniel, she looked at Keanu with red-rimmed eyes. What do we do first? Keanu turned from the window. First, we get Daniel's phone and save every message, every screenshot, every piece of evidence we can find. Then I make some calls. I know a lawyer who specializes in cyberbullying cases, and I know a journalist who isn't afraid of powerful people. We build our case quietly, carefully, before the webs even know we're coming, and when we're ready. He paused, and there was steel in his voice. When we're ready, we make sure the whole world knows what their perfect son really is. Daniel reached for his phone on the bedside table. His hands were shaking, but his eyes were clear. I saved everything, he said. Every message, every threat. I thought someday I might need proof. I didn't know I'd actually be brave enough to use it. Keanu smiled at him, a real smile this time. You're braver than you know, kid, and you're about to find out just how brave you can be. But as Daniel unlocked his phone and started scrolling through the messages, his face suddenly went pale. Oh no, he whispered. No, no, no. Maria leaned in, alarmed. What is it? What's wrong? Daniel turned the phone toward them, and Maria's blood ran cold. There, at the top of his messages, was a new notification from an unknown number, and the message was only 4 words long. I know you're awake. The room went completely silent. Maria stared at the message on Daniel's phone, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Daniel hadn't told anyone he was awake except the hospital staff and family. He hadn't posted on social media, hadn't called any friends. He had been conscious for less than 6 hours. And yet somehow, Marcus Webb already knew. Someone at the school? Keanu asked quietly, his voice calm even though his eyes had gone hard. Maria shook her head. The school doesn't know anything yet. We haven't contacted them. Then someone at the hospital. A nurse, an orderly, someone who recognized Daniel and made a phone call. Daniel was staring at the phone like it was a snake about to strike. His hands had started shaking again, all the courage he had built up in the last hour crumbling under the weight of 4 simple words. He's everywhere, Daniel whispered. I told you, his dad knows everyone. There's nowhere I can go where he can't find me. Maria reached for the phone, but Daniel pulled it away. Don't delete it, Keanu said quickly. Every message he sends is evidence, even the threats, especially the threats. He pulled out his own phone and stepped toward the door. I'm going to make some calls. Maria, stay with Daniel. Don't let anyone into this room that you don't recognize. And if any more messages come in, screenshot them immediately before anything can be deleted remotely. Maria nodded, too scared to argue. Keanu slipped out into the corridor, and she heard his voice, low and urgent, as he moved away from the door. Daniel was staring at the wall, his expression blank in a way that terrified her. Mijo, she said softly, sitting on the bed beside him. Look at me. He didn't move. Daniel, please. Slowly, he turned his head, and what Maria saw in his eyes made her heart break all over again. He looked defeated, empty, like the brief flame of hope that had flickered to life was already dying. Maybe this was a mistake, he said quietly. Maybe I should just delete everything and pretend none of this happened. Maybe if I go back to school and keep my head down and don't say anything, he'll leave me alone. Maria took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Listen to me, you tried that. For a year you tried being quiet, being invisible, hoping it would stop. And it almost killed you. The only reason you're sitting here right now is because something went wrong with the attempt, because the paramedics got there in time, because the universe decided you deserved another chance. You cannot go back to that life, Daniel. I won't let you. But what if it gets worse? His voice cracked. What if fighting back just makes him angrier? What if he comes after you too? I can't lose you, Mom. Maria pulled him into her arms, holding him tight. You're not going to lose me, and I'm not going to lose you. We're going to get through this together, and we're going to make sure Marcus Webb never hurts anyone again. But you have to trust me. You have to be brave for just a little longer. They stayed like that for what felt like hours, mother and son clinging to each other in a hospital room that suddenly felt very small and very exposed. Outside the window, the sky had gone fully dark, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. When Keanu came back into the room, he wasn't alone. Behind him was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and gray-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. She carried a leather briefcase and walked with the confident stride of someone who had spent decades fighting battles and winning them. Maria, Daniel, this is Patricia Chen, Keanu said. She's one of the best civil rights attorneys in California, and she specializes in cases involving minors and cyberbullying. She's agreed to take your case pro bono. Patricia stepped forward and shook Maria's hand firmly. Mr. Reeves has told me the basics, but I'd like to hear the full story from Daniel when he's ready. In the meantime, I've already filed for an emergency protective order based on the threatening message he received tonight. That means Marcus Webb is legally prohibited from contacting Daniel in any way. If he violates that order, it's an immediate arrest. Daniel looked up surprised. Just like that. Patricia's expression softened slightly. Just like that. The law isn't always slow, especially when there's evidence of ongoing harassment and a clear threat to a minor's safety. And from what Mr. Reeves tells me, you have quite a bit of evidence saved on that phone. I have everything, Daniel said quietly. Almost a year's worth of messages. Patricia nodded. Good, that's exactly what we need. I'm going to have my team start going through all of it tonight. We'll document everything, create a timeline, and identify any patterns that suggest coordinated harassment. If there are other victims, as you mentioned, we'll reach out to them carefully and see if they're willing to come forward. Maria felt like she was in a dream. 3 days ago, she had been a single mother working double shifts just to make ends meet, watching her son slip away and not knowing how to save him. Now she was sitting in a hospital room with a famous actor and a high-powered attorney, and people were actually taking her seriously. Why are you doing this? She asked Patricia. Pro bono isn't cheap. You could be spending this time on cases that pay. Patricia smiled, and for the first time, some of the sharpness left her face. Because I was Daniel once, she said simply. 35 years ago when cyberbullying didn't exist yet but regular bullying did, and nobody believed me either. I fought my way through it, put myself through law school, and built a career so I could make sure other kids didn't have to fight alone like I did. When Keanu called me tonight and told me your story, there was no question in my mind. This is exactly the kind of case I became a lawyer for. Daniel was staring at her with an expression Maria couldn't quite read. Then very slowly, he held out his phone. "Here," he said. "Everything's on there, every message, every threat, every time he told me to kill myself. It's all documented." Patricia took the phone gently, like she understood the weight of what he was giving her. "I'm going to fight for you, Daniel, and I don't lose." Over the next 2 weeks, Maria watched in amazement as the machinery of justice began to move. Patricia's team worked around the clock, cataloging the messages, building the timeline, and reaching out to other potential victims. The emergency protective order was granted, and for the first time in almost a year, Daniel went a full day without receiving a threatening message. Daniel was released from the hospital after a week, with strict instructions to continue outpatient therapy and check in regularly with a counselor. Maria took a leave of absence from both her jobs, using savings she had been putting aside for Daniel's college fund. It felt like the right use of the money now. What good was a college fund if her son didn't live long enough to use it? Keanu visited twice more, once to check on Daniel and once to bring a laptop loaded with editing software. Daniel had mentioned in passing that he liked making videos, and Keanu had remembered. "Sometimes the best way to process pain is to create something," Keanu had said, setting the laptop on Daniel's bed. "You don't have to share anything you make. It can just be for you. But having a way to express what you're feeling can make the weight a little easier to carry." Daniel had looked at the laptop like it was a gift from another planet. Then he had looked at Keanu and said very quietly, "Thank you for everything." Keanu had smiled that sad, gentle smile of his and put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You're going to be okay, kid. I believe that. Now you just have to believe it too." By the end of the second week, Patricia had identified 3 other victims of Marcus Webb's harassment. 2 were willing to come forward. One, a girl named Sophie, had been hospitalized for an eating disorder that she directly connected to the constant messages she received about her body. The other, a boy named Jalen, had transferred schools to escape, but still had nightmares about the things Marcus had said to him. With 3 victims and thousands of documented messages, Patricia felt they had enough to move forward. "We're filing a civil lawsuit against Marcus Webb and his parents," she told Maria and Daniel in her downtown office. "We're alleging intentional infliction of emotional distress, cyberbullying under California law, and negligent supervision. We're also referring the case to the district attorney's office for possible criminal charges." Daniel looked scared but resolute. "What happens now?" "Now we wait for their response, and we prepare for the possibility that this could get ugly. Richard Webb is not going to take this lying down. He's going to fight back with everything he has." Maria's stomach churned. What kind of fighting back? Patricia's expression grew serious. "Character attacks, most likely. They'll try to paint Daniel as unstable, as a liar, as someone who can't be trusted. They'll dig into your background, Maria, looking for anything they can use against you. They might try to intimidate the other victims into withdrawing their statements. And they'll almost certainly try to keep this out of the press for as long as possible." "What about Keanu?" Daniel asked. "Doesn't his involvement help?" Patricia nodded slowly. "It does and it doesn't. His support gives us credibility and media attention, which puts pressure on the Webbs to settle quickly. But it also raises the stakes. They know that if this story goes public with a celebrity attached, it could destroy Richard Webb's political career. That makes them dangerous. Cornered animals fight the hardest." That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every worst-case scenario in her mind. What if the Webbs found some way to discredit Daniel? What if the other victims backed out? What if they lost the case and ended up with nothing but legal bills and ruined reputations? She was still awake at 3 a.m. when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your son is a liar and a coward. Drop the lawsuit or suffer the consequences. This is your only warning." Maria's hands shook as she stared at the screen. Then, very deliberately, she screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Patricia. The Webbs had just made their first mistake. The threat against Maria changed everything. Patricia filed an amended complaint the next morning, adding witness intimidation and threatening communications to the list of charges. The district attorney's office, which had been moving slowly on the criminal referral, suddenly found the urgency they had been lacking. By noon, Richard Webb had been called in for questioning about his knowledge of his son's activities. The local news picked up the story that evening. Maria watched from her living room as a reporter stood outside the courthouse, explaining that Councilman Richard Webb's son was facing multiple allegations of cyberbullying that had contributed to at least one suicide attempt. The reporter mentioned the involvement of an anonymous celebrity advocate but didn't name Keanu directly. Still, it was enough. Social media exploded with speculation, and by morning the story had gone national. Daniel watched the coverage with a mix of terror and vindication. For so long, he had believed that nobody would care, that his pain didn't matter, that Marcus was untouchable. But here was proof that he had been wrong. People were paying attention. People were angry on his behalf. The first flowers arrived at their apartment that afternoon, from a stranger who had seen the story and wanted Daniel to know he wasn't alone. Then came letters, emails, messages from people all over the country who had experienced similar bullying and wanted to share their stories. By the end of the week, Patricia's office was drowning in correspondence from parents demanding to know how they could protect their own children. But with the support came the backlash. Richard Webb held a press conference 3 days after the story broke. He stood behind a podium with his wife and son, Marcus looking clean-cut and innocent in a button-down shirt, and he delivered a passionate defense. "My son is being persecuted by a troubled young man and his opportunistic mother," Webb said, his voice steady and controlled. "Daniel Gonzalez has a documented history of mental illness, and his mother has hired high-powered lawyers she can't afford, funded by celebrity money, to destroy my family's reputation. We will not be intimidated. We will fight these baseless allegations with everything we have, and we will prove that my son is innocent of these outrageous claims." Maria watched the press conference from her living room, her hands clenched so tight her nails left marks on her palms. Daniel sat beside her, pale and silent. "He's lying," Daniel whispered. "Everything he just said is a lie." "I know," Maria said, "and so does everyone who matters." But the press conference had an effect. Suddenly, the comment sections that had been full of support were now divided. Some people defended Daniel. Others called him a liar, a drama queen, a troubled kid looking for attention. The Webb family's PR machine was powerful, and they knew how to sow doubt. The next few days were agony. Maria went back to work because she had no choice, leaving Daniel with Rosa while she served tables and cleaned offices and pretended everything was fine. Daniel stayed home, afraid to go out, afraid of being recognized, afraid of seeing Marcus's face on his phone or his computer or anywhere else. He was starting to retreat again. Maria could see it. The spark that had ignited in the hospital was flickering, threatened by the storm of public opinion. Then Keanu came back. He showed up at their apartment on a Tuesday evening, unannounced, carrying a bag of takeout and looking tired but determined. Daniel was in his room, and Maria was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by bills she couldn't pay and news articles she couldn't stop reading. "You look terrible," Keanu said, setting the food on the table. Maria almost laughed. "Thanks, that's exactly what I needed to hear." Keanu sat down across from her. "I've been watching what's happening. The Webbs are playing dirty, but they're also getting desperate. That press conference was a mistake. It made them look defensive. And Patricia tells me the DA is moving forward with charges regardless of public opinion." "It doesn't feel like we're winning," Maria admitted. "It feels like we're drowning." "I know, but you're not. You're just in the middle of the storm. The hardest part is always the middle, when you can't see how it ends and everything feels impossible. But you have to keep going. For Daniel. For all the other kids who are watching this and wondering if they should speak up too." Maria looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same tired determination in his eyes that she felt in her bones. "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do you keep showing up, keep caring, keep fighting for people you barely know?" Keanu was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned back in his chair and looked out the window at the Los Angeles skyline. "Because the alternative is worse," he said simply. I've tried checking out. After Jennifer died, after the baby, there were years where I just went through the motions. I made movies, I showed up to premieres, I smiled for cameras, but I wasn't really there. I was just existing. And it was the loneliest, emptiest feeling in the world. He turned back to her. What changed was realizing that the pain never goes away, but you can choose what to do with it. You can let it make you bitter and closed off, or you can let it make you kinder, more compassionate, more willing to sit with someone else's pain because you know how much it helps. I choose kindness. Every day I wake up and I choose it again, and most days it's enough. Maria felt tears pricking at her eyes. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. You are, Keanu said firmly. I've seen it. The way you fought for Daniel, the way you refused to give up even when everything seemed hopeless, the way you're still sitting here, still fighting, even though you're exhausted and scared and overwhelmed. That's strength, Maria, real strength, the kind that matters. Before Maria could respond, Daniel's door opened and he walked into the kitchen. He looked surprised to see Keanu, but not unhappy. Hey, Daniel said quietly. Hey yourself, Keanu replied. How are you holding up? Daniel shrugged, that teenage gesture that could mean anything. Some days are okay. Some days I can't stop reading the comments online. Some days I think we should never have started this. Keanu nodded. Can I tell you something? Daniel sat down at the table, and Maria noticed that he looked older than he had 2 weeks ago. Not in a bad way. In the way that people look when they've been through something hard and come out the other side still standing. When I was about your age, Keanu said, my best friend told me that the people who matter don't mind and the people who mind don't matter. I didn't understand it then, but I understand it now. All those people online calling you a liar, saying you made this up, they don't know you. They've never met you. Their opinions are based on nothing but their own prejudices and the lies the webs are telling. They don't matter. He leaned forward. The people who matter are the ones who believe you, your mom, your aunt, Patricia, the other kids who came forward, me, we know the truth. And the legal system is going to prove it no matter how much noise the webs make in the press. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said very softly, what if we lose? Keanu looked at him steadily. Then we lose having tried, we lose having fought, we lose having stood up for what was right even when it was terrifying. And that's not really losing, Daniel. That's living. That's being brave. That's the kind of thing you can look back on 50 years from now and be proud of no matter how it turned out. Something in Daniel's expression shifted. The doubt was still there, but underneath it, Maria saw that spark again, that determination, that refusal to give up. I want to make a video, Daniel said suddenly. I want to tell my story in my own words, not through lawyers or news reports. Just me, talking directly to the camera, explaining what happened and why I'm fighting back. I want people to see me, not just read about me. Maria's heart clenched. Are you sure, once it's out there, you can't take it back? Daniel nodded. I'm sure. I've been quiet for too long. Marcus counted on me being too scared to speak. He counted on me staying in the shadows while he destroyed me. But I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to let the whole world see who I really am, and they can decide for themselves who to believe. Keanu smiled, and it was the first real smile Maria had seen from him in weeks. Then let's make a video. They filmed it that night in Daniel's small bedroom with the laptop Keanu had given him. Daniel sat in front of his poster-covered wall, wearing a plain t-shirt, looking directly into the camera. No scripts, no edits, just a teenage boy telling his truth. My name is Daniel Gonzalez, he began, his voice shaking slightly but growing stronger with each word. 2 weeks ago, I tried to end my life because I didn't think I had any other choice. For almost a year, I was bullied by someone I thought was my friend. Every day, he sent me messages telling me I was worthless, that nobody would miss me, that the world would be better off without me. And I believed him. He paused, taking a breath. I'm making this video because I want other kids who are going through the same thing to know that they're not alone. That there are people who will believe them, who will fight for them, who will help them see that the bullies are wrong. I also want people to know that kindness matters. A stranger showed me kindness when I was at my lowest, and it saved my life. If you're struggling right now, please reach out. Talk to someone. Ask for help. You are worth saving. And there are people who will prove it to you if you just give them the chance. He looked directly into the camera, and Maria saw tears running down his face. To Marcus Webb, if you're watching this, you almost won. You almost broke me, but I'm still here, I'm still fighting. And I'm not going to stop until everyone knows what you did. The video was uploaded at midnight. By morning, it had 5 million views. By the end of the week, it had 50 million. And buried in the comments, among the hate and the support and the arguments, were thousands upon thousands of messages from kids all over the world who saw themselves in Daniel's story and finally felt brave enough to speak. The Webb's lawyers called Patricia that Friday, requesting a settlement meeting. The tide had finally turned. The settlement meeting took place in a conference room downtown, all glass walls and leather chairs and the smell of expensive coffee. Maria sat beside Patricia, her hands folded in her lap to hide the trembling. Daniel was at home with Rosa. Patricia had decided it was better for him not to be present for this. Across the table sat Richard Webb, his wife Catherine, and a team of lawyers that outnumbered Patricia's side 3-1. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. Richard Webb looked older than he had on television. The lines around his eyes were deeper, the gray in his hair more pronounced. Whatever confidence he had projected at the press conference was gone. In its place was the exhausted desperation of a man watching his carefully constructed life crumble. "Let's cut to the chase," Patricia said, opening her briefcase. "You asked for this meeting because you know you're going to lose. The DA is filing charges next week. Your son's messages are going to be read in open court, and every news outlet in the country is going to cover it. The only question now is how much damage you want to do to your family on the way down." Richard Webb's lead attorney, a silver-haired man with cold eyes, started to respond, but Richard held up a hand. "I want to speak to Ms. Gonzalez directly," he said quietly. His lawyers exchanged alarmed looks. Catherine Webb reached for her husband's arm, but he shook her off. "Ms. Gonzalez," he said, and Maria was startled to see something that looked almost like genuine pain in his eyes. "I'm not here to make excuses for my son. What he did was wrong. I know that now. I should have known it sooner." Maria said nothing. She just watched him, waiting. "When the first allegations came out, I told myself it was just boys being boys, teenage drama. I told myself that Daniel was exaggerating, that he was mentally unstable, that my son couldn't possibly be capable of the things he was being accused of." Richard's voice cracked slightly. "I was wrong. I've seen the messages now, all of them, and I don't recognize the person my son has become." He took a breath, and Maria saw his hands shaking on the table. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, and neither does Marcus. But I want you to know that the settlement we're proposing isn't about protecting my reputation or my political career. It's about making sure this never happens again, not to Daniel, not to any other child." Patricia slid a folder across the table. "Then let's see what you're offering." The terms were more than Maria had dared to hope for. A formal public apology from Marcus and his family. Full payment of Daniel's medical bills, therapy costs, and a trust fund for his future education. A substantial donation to anti-bullying organizations in Daniel's name. And most importantly, Marcus's agreement to plead guilty to criminal harassment charges and complete a juvenile rehabilitation program. "No jail time?" Maria asked, her voice hard. Richard looked at her. "He's 15 years old. The juvenile system is designed to rehabilitate, not punish. But I give you my word that he will face real consequences, and he will never contact Daniel or any of the other victims again." Maria was quiet for a long moment. Part of her wanted to refuse, wanted to drag Marcus through a public trial and watch him suffer the way Daniel had suffered. But another part of her, the part that had sat on a beach with a grieving stranger and learned that kindness was stronger than vengeance, knew that wouldn't actually help. "I want something else," she said finally. Richard leaned forward. "Name it." "I want Marcus to face Daniel. I want him to look my son in the eye and apologize, not through lawyers, not through press releases, in person. And I want him to understand exactly what he did and exactly how much damage he caused." Richard Webb's face went pale. I don't know if Marcus is ready for that. Then get him ready, Maria said quietly. Because that's my condition, take it or leave it. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Richard Webb nodded slowly. I'll make it happen. 3 weeks later, Maria sat in Patricia's office, watching through a glass partition as Marcus Webb walked into the room where Daniel was waiting. Marcus looked smaller than Maria had imagined. Just a kid, really, with acne scars and nervous hands and eyes that couldn't quite meet Daniel's. All the bravado he had projected in his messages was gone. In person, he was just a frightened teenage boy who had done something terrible and was finally being forced to face it. Daniel sat calmly, his hands folded on the table, his expression unreadable. He had spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment with his therapist, and Maria could see the work paying off. He wasn't the broken boy who had been wheeled into the emergency room 2 months ago. He was someone stronger, someone who had found his voice. I'm sorry, Marcus said, the words barely audible. I'm sorry for everything I said, for everything I did. I don't have an excuse. I was angry and jealous and I wanted to hurt someone and you were an easy target. But that doesn't make it okay. Nothing makes it okay. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice steady. Do you know what you did to me? Marcus flinched. Yes, I read the court documents about the hospital, about the... Say it. Marcus's face crumpled. About the suicide attempt, about how you almost died because of what I said. Every day, Daniel said quietly. Every single day I woke up and the first thing I saw was a message from you telling me I didn't deserve to exist. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? How it gets inside your head and becomes your own voice, telling you the same thing over and over until you believe it. Marcus was crying now, tears streaming down his face. I didn't realize. No, Daniel agreed. You didn't think, you didn't realize, because you didn't see me as a real person. You saw me as a target, as entertainment, as a way to feel powerful. And you never once stopped to consider that I was a human being with feelings and fears and dreams just like you. He leaned forward slightly. I'm not going to forgive you, not today, maybe not ever. What you did changed me forever, and I can't pretend it didn't. But I am going to let go of the anger because carrying it is too heavy and I'm tired of being weighed down by you. So here's what I need you to understand. This ends now. Not just with me, but with everyone. You don't get to do this to anyone else. And if I ever hear that you're bullying someone again, I will make sure the whole world knows exactly who you really are. Marcus nodded frantically. I won't. I swear I won't. I'm getting help. Therapy, anger management, everything my parents could find. I don't want to be this person anymore. Daniel looked at him for a long moment, and Maria saw something shift in her son's expression. Not forgiveness exactly, but something close to it. Understanding, maybe, or pity. Good, Daniel said finally. Then maybe something good can come out of all this pain. He stood up and walked toward the door, and Maria met him in the hallway, wrapping her arms around him as soon as he was close enough. I'm so proud of you, she whispered into his hair. So incredibly proud. Daniel hugged her back, tight enough that she could feel his heart beating against her chest. I did it, he said, and there was wonder in his voice. I actually did it. You did, Maria agreed, and now it's over. But it wasn't quite over. There was one more thing Maria needed to do. She found Keanu at the same beach where they had first met, sitting on the same piece of driftwood, staring at the same gray ocean. It was early morning again, fog clinging to the water, and the beach was nearly empty. He looked up when she approached, and his face broke into a genuine smile. Maria, how did it go? She sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Daniel faced him. Marcus apologized. It's not perfect, and there's still a long road ahead, but it feels like the beginning of the end. Like maybe we can actually move forward now. Keanu nodded slowly. That's good, that's really good. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the waves crash against the shore. Maria thought about everything that had happened since that first morning when she had collapsed crying in the sand. How much had changed. How much she had changed. I never thanked you properly, she said finally. For everything you did, for showing up at the hospital, for bringing Patricia, for the laptop, for all of it. You didn't have to do any of that. Keanu shrugged slightly. I wanted to, that's reason enough. But why? I've asked you before, and you've given me beautiful answers about kindness and pain and choosing to care. But I still don't completely understand. Out of all the people in the world who are suffering, why did you choose us? Keanu was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out that same worn photograph of Jennifer, the one he had shown her in the hospital. When she died, I made a promise, he said softly. I promised that I would live for both of us, that I would try to leave the world a little better than I found it, that I would look for opportunities to help, really help, not just write checks or show up at charity events, but actually sit with people in their pain and do whatever I could to ease it. He looked at her, and his eyes were shining with unshed tears. That morning on the beach, when I saw you crying, I felt something, like I was supposed to be there, like the universe had put us in the same place at the same time for a reason. And I've learned to trust those feelings even when they don't make logical sense. So I stayed, I listened, and everything that came after. It wasn't a sacrifice, Maria. It was a gift. To be part of your story, to watch Daniel find his courage, to see kindness win over cruelty. That's what I live for now. That's what keeps me going. Maria felt tears spilling down her cheeks. She reached over and took his hand, squeezing gently. Thank you, she whispered, for choosing us, for teaching Daniel that strangers can be kind, for teaching me that asking for help isn't weakness. Keanu squeezed her hand back. You taught me something too. You reminded me why I made that promise in the first place. Sometimes, when you're in the darkness for too long, you forget what the light looks like. But watching you fight for your son, watching Daniel find his voice, that was the light. And I needed to see it as much as you needed to find it. They sat together on the beach as the fog lifted, and the sun broke through the clouds, painting the ocean in shades of gold and silver. Two people who had been strangers, brought together by pain and chance, and something that felt like fate. Maria thought about everything she had learned. That kindness could come from unexpected places. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to keep going anyway. That love wasn't always enough to fix everything, but it mattered anyway because it was what gave life meaning. And she thought about Daniel, at home with Rosa, probably already working on his next video, telling his story to the world and helping other kids find the strength to tell theirs. He's going to be okay, she said, as much to herself as to Keanu. He is, Keanu agreed, and so are you. Maria smiled, and for the first time in months it felt real. Yeah, she said quietly, I think we are. 6 months later, Daniel spoke at a national conference on cyberbullying prevention. He told his story to an audience of thousands, his voice strong and clear, his mother watching from the front row with tears of pride streaming down her face. In the crowd, unannounced and unrecognized in a baseball cap and plain hoodie, Keanu Reeves sat and listened, a small smile on his face. When Daniel finished speaking, the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. And Daniel looked out at the sea of faces and finally understood what Keanu had been trying to tell him all along. That pain could be transformed into purpose. That kindness was never wasted. And that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we least expect, strangers who show up in our darkest moments and remind us that we are worth fighting for. Daniel found his mother in the crowd and smiled. I'm okay, Mom, he said. I'm really, truly okay. And Maria held her son and knew, finally, that the storm was over. The light had won,